Aloha. My name is Donna and coming hi 7Camvels3web.
And I'm Wally Campbell. Aloha. There are many people who came along the way because that was the time of the second Renaissance back in '92. And for the island of Oahu, it was kind of like where young Hawaiians from the UH and people who were going back on the island started coming to Halava. And when they went into Halava, they just kind of realized, that it was a special place and there was a lot of sacred sites that needed to be saved. So we were gaining, momentum among the Maka'inana and then cultural people. We thought that one of the main important things was to preserve what was left of the valley, because every time they came in and marked it for passive preservation, where they come in and they GPS it, or I don't know if they had GPS at the time, but they marked it down and then they just bowl it over and they would say, this is what this site was, an amphitheater, or, there were petroglyphs that aren't there anymore. So every time something like that happens, it's like a page of our history is being torn out, and you're never going to get that back again. All you have is, the mo'olelo of the people that were in there and that they seen that. And, right now it's 2011, and it's been a long road. And many of the people that joined us on that journey aren't here anymore. At least a dozen of them have passed on. So for us, it's a continuation of that legacy to finish what we started a long time ago, even though the H3 is finished and the cars are running on. Sure, people are going here and there from Ko'olau side to the Ewa side, much faster now. But, at what price, was it really worth it? I don't think so.
As a result of the highway going through, there was a mitigation process that began that involved people who came from the areas of impact, came from different organizations who had concerns, for the area, cultural organizations, institutions of education, and all getting together to sort of establish a working group. And I think that process was probably was well intended. And for me, I think that the process probably had different objectives and aims from HLID and then from the working group itself. I think for the working group, their objectives were to provide that mana'o, to provide a history of those areas that were impacted, to really be involved in the process, to really be involved. And by that I mean to be able to provide mana'o what they envisioned, checks and balances in the process, and at the end, probably looking for direct involvement with any end project that would come out as a result of the mitigation. And so as a result of that, when the process doesn't work, it's just one more thing in which we have to address as Kanaka Oiwi, trying to get a foot in the door, trying to put something on the table that actually appears and then ultimately becomes the objective, a voice of authority that is accepted on the other side of the table as, okay, they know what they're talking about. The fact that we spent all this money on a plan that is flawed and is almost, I wouldn't say it's of no use, but the heart and soul and mana'o and mana of the people who put it there, even though they knew, we all knew we wouldn't have everything in there, but at least the things that we stressed that were very, very important, some of those things were edited, revised, and so this whole idea of trust is an issue in terms of this kind of process,
I think the main thing we want to get in this process is that something like this would not happen again, so that our message would be, if this ever happened to another cultural site that they would have to take these steps in order to complete that. And I think somehow we did touch upon that, and we did make changes for that, you know. I hadn't been into Halava once they opened up the freeway. So when I finally went back, about maybe '07 was when I went back into Halava. And you know, for me, it was really hard to go back in there because, you know, it was such an eha to go back in there. It was like, oh, you know, you lost the battle, you know, going back in there, and, you know, you could hear the cars above you, you know, and it was hard to find my spiritual center in there, sitting underneath the kukui trees and trying to find my center. And all I could, you know, hear was the cars whizzing by, and just, it brought up a lot of suppressed feelings for me. As far as, you know, trying to get your spiritual side going when you go back into, you know, even Luluku is just like that. Luluku is very loud in that turnaround. So that is something that I see that, you know, somehow, you know, needs to be addressed. They saw these sites as non-contiguous sites, not being connected, you know.
That's right.
And I didn't know what that meant at the time, but I knew these sites, you know, were all like part of a ohana. You know, it was like a kauhale in there, you know. And they were all kind of connected, especially the stream areas in Halava. You could feel like, you know, there was a presence in there at one time because there was probably a lot of activity during the stream areas, you know. Say that these sites were non-contiguous, meaning that, you know, they're not as important because they're not all part of one complex, which we, you know, now today look at it as
A landscape.
a cultural landscape, yes. So, you know, that's something that, you know, I think we need to try to address in the future as far as, you know, bringing awareness to that.
If we say that a site is discontiguous, what we're saying then is that all of the various sites within one given area are not connected. Now we know, as Kanako Oiwi, from our mo'olelo and our history, that that is not so. That all the places within one given area are usually connected. They usually are connected by genealogy, by history, by mo'olelo, by what had occurred at those places. So are too then the landmarks located within those areas. Once we say that an area is discontiguous, what in effect we're doing is we're chopping up the aina in little bits and pieces, and we're saying, okay, now all of a sudden this piece is not as important as this one. Now, when you talk about Halava, Luluku, and Haiku Valley and Mokapu, what you're saying then is that a whole ili, a whole valley, a whole peninsula, each of the areas within those areas are not connected. And we know that that's not true.
Tell that to the Konohiki.
So, exactly, the Konohikis knew. That was their job, to know the entire history of a land and its place, all the significant connections. So we need to have our people understand that when we're talking about a cultural, traditional cultural landscape, we're talking about how it used to look. We're talking about looking at old pictures of Nu'uanu, old pictures of that valley, and really going, wow, did it look like that? The mana that exudes from the picture of a place like that tells you instantly what the connection there was. Same for Luluku. If we look around at that place and we look at the terraces, we look at things that we know are the Pohaku Akane, we look at the burials there, we know that place is connected to a much larger area even than just Luluku itself. It is in fact part of the Kaneohe Ahupua'a. Everything functioned as one whole. And so for anybody to say to us, oh, this is less important than something, it's just, it doesn't make any sense at all to us, and it just unravels our na'au. The cultural landscape, the visual landscape has been severely impacted by the placement of that cement monstrosity. Kids that are being born today that will always remember that, hey, H3 was always there, bro. It was always there when I was growing up, right? They have no idea what that visual landscape, that cultural landscape looked like. And those things are important for us because ultimately they have stories that connect us back to that aina, back to that land, back to the blood, back to our genealogy. So whenever we affect the Aina, I mean, if we believe that the Aina, Papa, is our ancestress, that we are the land and the land is us, then the most important adverse impact that any kind of building can do is to harm the Aina. Because by virtue of that harm, then so are we harmed. And if we allow this to keep on happening, and if we have no voice in the kind of process that's meant to give us a voice in the first place, and that mana'o is really of no value, then what good is the process? In effect, it's flawed. Is the process itself an adverse impact? Aho nui is a good value, that we be patient and that we endure over the long run. Aho nui is the great breath. Our our kupuna, they have great breath. And they expect us to sustain ourselves the way they did, and with grace and dignity. And I think the other value I like to express maybe is ho'oponopono. No, make it right. Build to make it right. It's not only a healing thing, it's an effort to really go in and make things pono. Make it balanced, make it good again, make it so that we can be right, so that the project can move on.
As we walk this path, the story doesn't end here. Doesn't end here with us. We keep on going, and what I see is our people, like myself, are having a trouble living in two worlds. One, we try to emulate, our kupuna, and the other we try to emulate, this Western lifestyle. What I'd like at the end is that, our people to have their own story to tell, because we have our own story. We have our own mo'olelo to tell each other, to tell our families, and if this mo'olelo doesn't get passed down, we get erased as a culture. As long as we keep we ho'omau, keep on doing what we want. I think as far as kupa'a, we've been that for a while, so it's time to holomua and go forward with open eyes. Akahele, be careful at times at the road ahead, but it's doable. The vision that I see for our Hawaiian people, as long as we're allowed to share our stories, is a good one. Our story never ends. Just want to dedicate this to all the ohana who started this process and aren't here with us today. Mahalo.